All right. Hello, everyone. My name is William, and I am a graduate research assistant at the Social System Design Lab at Washington University in St. Louis.
And I am Ellis Ballard. I am the director of the Social System Design Lab at WashU in St. Louis.
And today we're going to be talking about some work that we've been building upon from previous work on advancing the methods for informing group model building, subscript design decisions, and script adaptations. Next slide. And so today, our agenda will be covering kind of the background and context of subscript design decisions, some of the previous work that we've laid out. Talking also about an adapted Delphi process to help us build confidence in our framework, and also talk about some of the results that we've had from some preliminary iterations, and also some of the implications for practice.
So I'm going to provide a bit of that background. So there are a number of approaches that have been developed over the past 20 years for standardizing group model building practice. Here we highlight two, but these are not meant to be comprehensive. The idea of scripts or scripted group model building activities emerged more than 2 decades ago, thinking about how do you create standardized processes for informing group model building practices. And on the right, developed by Ackerman, Anderson, Eden, and Richardson, a scripts map, which is a resource for informing design decisions about combining scripts to create a larger group model building process, and thinking about some of the underlying considerations here. And these script resources are the foundation on which a number of us learn and practice and teach and refer back for best practice. And yet there are a number of challenges as we think about the expansion of group model building practice to new contexts, new settings. So group model building were originally, scripts that are compiled in Scriptopedia were really compiled for policymaking contexts and organizational boards and strategic management consideration. And yet group model building has been used and adapted in settings all over the world with village community members, with high school students, with neighborhood community councils. And the scripts as they currently stand provide not little guidance on how to manage those adaptations. And as we're thinking about the expansion of group model building practice and developing best practice, there's a couple strategies to pursue. We can think about individuals developing their own practice expertise, but that takes years and years and years to develop. We can also think about experimentation to talk about what scripts are used in which context. But that as well is, there's more design variation than can possibly be managed in terms of experimental conditions. And so the challenge that we're interested in addressing is how do we quickly and effectively adapt group model building practice to support work with diverse audiences while retaining coherence to core principles. And so last year at the System Dynamics Conference, a group including myself, Peter Hovmand, Ichi Zhu, Lin Zhao, Richard Hu, and Dayu Zhao presented on a preliminary concept of subscript unit testing for group model building workshop design and adaptation. And there are 2 components to that idea. One is to propose the idea of a subscript design decision, which is constitutes multiple design choices that happen within scripts. So if we think about nested decisions, units or subscript design decisions are within scripts, and multiple scripts make up a session, and multiple sessions make up a project. And we also proposed this sort of corresponding framework of assessment approaches to inform the selection and the evaluation of the effectiveness of these design decisions. And really of interest here is the idea of subscript design decisions or units, and unit testing as a systematic and rapid testing of subscript design decisions in order to inform practice. And the idea here is that we're interested in exploring ways to develop widespread and lightweight protocols to inform subscript design decisions that don't require comprehensive impact evaluation of full-scale projects. And so this poster from last year was building on previous work from the Compact Project in Australia, which was funded by the National Institutes of Health, as well as work in Shanghai and China, funded by the Lupina Foundation. And both of these were preliminary pilots to try to work out the basic grammar of the idea of unit testing. And so at that work, we came out with a provisional typology of units. But this was based on 3 or 4 people's practice experience. Didn't have any larger systematic testing.
And following on what Alice was referring to with the provisional typology of units being based on like 4 people's practice experience, we decided to bring this out to like the larger group model building community of practitioners through a series of more robust iterations to help build more confidence in the framework. So next slide, we propose an adapted Delphi process where for the first round, we would present the initial unit testing typology to a group of group modeling practitioners, and we would get some primary elicitation of the different design considerations made in advance of a group modeling session. And with that, we were able to conduct it with some students from the Social System Design Lab and also cluster these findings into revised typology. Our proposed next step is in round 2, where we are we're in parallel. We are doing hoping to do a second round of unit testing, but currently we are still eliciting feedback from group model building practitioners on the revised typology that we have. And our hope for round 3 is to get this revised typology and elicit further feedback from group modeling practitioners to achieve a 75% consensus. And so if we go to the next slide, yeah, we can currently we've passed this first round, and we can show you some of the results of it. And so for the next slide, over here is like when we first worked with the group modeling practitioners to get some initial insights into the different design considerations made in advance of a group modeling session. And in the next slide, we also have images from some Social System Design Lab students conducting unit tests to see what it's like in practice from their purview. And in the next slide, this is where we currently stand right now. So we are hoping to do a second round of unit testing, but because of COVID, we've had to delay that a little bit, but it also invites opportunities for interesting adaptations for online group model building. So currently where we stand is the feedback from group modeling practitioners on revised typology. And in the next slide, we show that we decided to create a Google website to help us share and spread the survey that we hope to get from group modeling practitioners outside of just the Social System Design Lab. In the next slide, we can see that we have various surveys hoping to capture feedbacks on what we propose as like an initial typology and to see like, is this accurate to their experience, what's missing from it, and just hoping to get some insights from their lived experiences as a group modeling practitioner. And so as a result, we found that there's basically 4 components to how we're organizing this. And so the first set is a cluster. So clusters are kind of like these broad categories of subscript design decisions. Dimensions are these subcategories within each cluster, which we'll show you later with our organized framework. And within the framework, we also have examples that are not meant to be exhaustive, but these are potential design options that we can test in the design stage of group model building. And we also have some questions that are also not meant to be exhaustive, just to help us inform some design decisions. And over here, we have these 4 broad clusters that we've seen. And so for the first one is prompts. So these are design decisions to either alter the content, language, selection, or presentation of activities and prompts in hopes of getting a different outcome or behavior interaction amongst participants. Facilitation refers to any design decisions related to how the facilitator presents themselves, or in terms of like their facilitation style, their pedagogy, the type of language they use, and their approach to participation in a group model building session. Configuration, on the other hand, looks into kind of any design decisions related to how participants are grouped, and also how we're able to use and manipulate the space of the session. And materials refers to any design decisions related to the physical or digital materials of group model building. So whether that's deciding between paper versus an online interface, or how that would work out via different online conference platforms. Those are some of the decision considerations that would be made. And over here is kind of like how we organize the framework. And so again, we have like clusters, which are kind of like the broad categories. Dimensions are sub categories of these respective clusters. And these unit examples are non-exhaustive and meant to help us think through what are the potential units that we could test within these clusters and dimensions. And also the questions are just to help us inform any design decisions made.
So as William shared, we are sort of right in this middle of phase 2 of this Delphi process. And we wanted to use this as an opportunity to share out that work in progress, as well as to create momentum to integrate further feedback. So some reflections on subscript design decision framework that we have been wrestling with already. So first is this question of what constitutes a subscript design decision and what constitutes a general design consideration when doing group model building work. Something that came up in the initial piloting work of unit testing sessions was this question of saying, is this specific to a unit, to a script, or is the design decision something that's just saying, how do we approach our work? So a lot of the questions that came out were around management of power dynamics within sessions. And this conundrum or this debate is emerging, saying, is a specific tactic to manage power dynamics the subscript design decision, or is the management and the attention to power dynamics a subscript design decision? And so we're sort of working to get this feedback and refine these questions. Second point is that we're emerging distinctions between testable and non-testable units. We're thinking about this as being a framework to inform design decisions, but also an input to rapid testing, where prior to a workshop, you could run quick experiments or iterations of a script to decide sort of what is preliminary insights about the potential outcome of that choice. There are some that are just not necessarily feasible for practice in terms of gender identity, professional identity of facilitators for an individual script. That may be an important design consideration, but that's not necessarily feasible for testing. And finally, we've run into practical limitations on rapid unit testing as we're experimenting with these ideas as they evolve. Within our group at the Social System Design Lab, we have probably larger availability of participants and facilitators than many groups. And even then, the coordination and the timing proposes challenges. But there are, as William mentioned, opportunities that are opening up to expand and adapt this framework and these ideas to digital spaces where participation may be a lot easier to convene than in physical space. So implications at this point for group model building practice. As a practice of group model building proliferates in new fields, these questions are becoming about rigor, about intentionality and design, about how do we attribute impact of group model building, of change to group model building work is becoming more salient. And group model building is being used for more and more application areas, from program design to policy evaluation, collective impact, facilitation, community intervention, and therefore the stakes of good design are higher. And so future work is going to continue, as we discuss, to refine these frameworks, refine testing, refine documentation of protocols, but that doesn't mean we need to wait to finalize these insights in order to integrate these perspectives into our practice. If we think about group model building as science and craft, we want to think about how are we doing the reflective work to incorporate insight into our practice. And so next steps, as William mentions, we're going to expand outreach for feedback to a larger group of group model building practitioners to flesh out this phase 2. And we're going to integrate that feedback and redistribute the revised feedback that integrates folks' perspectives for phase 3. And the goal with a survey to get 75% agreement around the components of this framework. In parallel, we're going to be drafting protocols for rapid iterative unit testing to go alongside this framework and to integrate these tools into a shared, more publicly usable platform like Scriptopedia. So that's what we have. Thank you for joining us, and we welcome any questions.